The BMF title was supposed to represent something simple: violence, chaos, fighters who never take a step back. When the UFC introduced the BMF belt, it wasn't meant to be a traditional championship. It wasn't tied to rankings, title defenses, or long championship reigns. Instead, it was supposed to represent something raw inside the sport, something emotional. The BMF title was about attitude. It represented fighters who stepped into the cage with a different kind of energy. Fighters who didn't fight cautiously. Fighters who pushed the pace no matter what. And when fans first saw the belt, they immediately understood what it stood for. The first fight for the title between Jorge Masvidal and Nate Diaz made perfect sense. Both men had built their reputations on chaos. Neither fighter was known for playing it safe. Fans expected violence, and that's exactly what they got. Over time, the image of the BMF title became tied to fighters who brought excitement every time they stepped into the octagon. Fighters like Justin Gaethje, whose fights rarely go the distance without turning into complete wars. So when Max Holloway stepped into the octagon against Charles Oliveira, the expectations were obvious. Two of the most exciting fighters in MMA. Two men known for relentless offense. Two fighters who built their careers on action. But when the fight unfolded, something felt different. The pace was slower than expected. Large parts of the fight were controlled on the ground, and almost immediately fans started asking a strange question. Did the BMF title just lose its meaning? To understand why this fight created so much debate, we have to go back to what the BMF title was supposed to represent in the first place. Because from the beginning, the idea behind the belt was symbolic. It wasn't meant to be about technical mastery. It wasn't meant to reward the most well-rounded fighter in the sport. Instead, it celebrated a certain personality inside the cage. The fighter who refuses to step backwards. The fighter who thrives in chaos. The fighter who creates moments fans remember for years. That's why the BMF title resonated so strongly with the MMA community when it was first introduced. Fans immediately associated it with fighters who created unforgettable wars inside the octagon. And that list of fighters grew quickly. Justin Gaethje became one of the most obvious examples. His fights are rarely slow. They rarely involve long periods of control or cautious strategy. Instead, they are explosions of violence. Every exchange feels dangerous. Every round feels unpredictable. That's what fans imagine when they hear the phrase, "baddest motherfucker." But when Max Holloway and Charles Oliveira met for the belt, the result created a completely different kind of conversation. Because technically, the fight was impressive. Strategically, it was fascinating. But emotionally, something felt missing for many fans watching. The chaos that people associate with the BMF title simply wasn't there. And that absence sparked one of the most interesting debates the MMA community has had about the belt. To understand what really happened in this fight, we have to look closely at the styles involved. Because on paper, this matchup looked like a guaranteed action fight. Max Holloway has built his entire career around relentless striking pressure. He is one of the highest volume punchers in the history of the UFC. His style is simple in theory, but incredibly difficult to deal with in practice. He overwhelms opponents, constant combinations, constant movement, constant pressure. Over the years, this style has broken some of the toughest fighters in the featherweight division. Opponents like Brian Ortega, Calvin Kattar, and Yair Rodriguez all struggled to keep up with Holloway's pace. But Charles Oliveira represents a completely different type of threat. Oliveira is one of the most dangerous grapplers the UFC has ever seen. His submission record alone speaks for itself. But what makes Oliveira truly dangerous is not just his ability to finish fights on the ground, it's how quickly he forces opponents into that world. His grappling is aggressive. He constantly hunts for takedowns, clinch positions, and scrambles. Once the fight reaches the mat, he immediately begins setting traps. And when fighters are forced to defend submissions, their entire mindset changes. Instead of attacking, they start surviving. That dynamic changed the entire rhythm of the fight. Instead of the striking battle many fans expected, Charles Oliveira repeatedly forced grappling exchanges. Every time the fight touched the ground, the danger level for Max Holloway increased dramatically. Oliveira's jiu-jitsu is built around constant threats: arm triangles, back takes, choke setups, position traps. Even when he isn't finishing the submission, he forces his opponent into a defensive mindset. And that's exactly what happened during this fight. Instead of flowing combinations and endless striking exchanges, Holloway found himself defending positions, escaping grips, protecting his neck, trying to prevent Oliveira from advancing to even more dangerous positions. From a tactical perspective, Oliveira executed a brilliant strategy. He neutralized Holloway's greatest strength. But for many fans watching, the fight didn't resemble what they imagine when they hear the phrase BMF. The chaos that defines Holloway's fight simply never had the chance to appear. And this is where the debate surrounding the BMF title becomes complicated. Because the reality is that Charles Oliveira didn't break any rules of the sport. He didn't fight cautiously. He didn't stall the action. Instead, he used one of the most dangerous skill sets in MMA: his grappling. From a pure mixed martial arts perspective, Oliveira executed a nearly perfect game plan. He recognized the danger that Max Holloway presents in open striking exchanges. Few fighters in the sport can survive long periods of stand-up fighting with Holloway. His output is relentless. His ability to mix combinations, angles, and pace makes him one of the most exhausting opponents any fighter can face. So Oliveira did something intelligent. He removed the fight from Holloway's world. Instead of trading combinations in the center of the octagon, Oliveira forced grappling exchanges where his own advantages became overwhelming. This is one of the fundamental truths of mixed martial arts. Great fighters don't just fight their opponents. They move the fight into environments where they are strongest. And Oliveira has spent his entire career building one of the most dangerous submission arsenals the sport has ever seen. Once the fight reached the ground, the dynamic shifted completely. Instead of watching Holloway build his usual rhythm, fans watched him defend positions and escape threats. Technically, this was high-level MMA, but emotionally, the fight didn't feel like what many fans imagined when they heard the words, "baddest motherfucker." But there's another reason this fight sparked such a strong reaction from the MMA community, and that reason is Max Holloway himself. Holloway has spent years building a reputation as one of the most exciting fighters in the history of the UFC. His fights rarely slow down. They rarely become tactical chess matches. Instead, they become storms. When Holloway fought Calvin Kattar, the result was one of the most dominant striking performances ever recorded inside the octagon. For 5 rounds, Holloway unleashed an almost unbelievable level of volume striking. He landed hundreds of punches. He taunted his opponent mid-fight. He even looked away from his opponent while throwing combinations. Moments like that helped define the image of Holloway as one of the sport's purest action fighters. Even his fights against Alexander Volkanovski were filled with relentless pace and incredible technical exchanges. Holloway has never been known for slowing fights down. He thrives when chaos appears, which is why this fight felt so unusual to so many fans. For long stretches, Holloway wasn't the one dictating the pace. He was reacting, defending, surviving dangerous grappling sequences. That shift alone was enough to make the entire fight feel unfamiliar. And that leads to the deeper question behind all of this. Maybe the BMF title didn't lose its meaning. Maybe what happened was something else entirely. Maybe the sport itself has simply evolved beyond the idea that the BMF title originally represented. Mixed martial arts today is more complex than it was a decade ago. Fighters are more well-rounded. Strategies are more advanced. The best athletes in the sport now train across multiple disciplines simultaneously. Striking alone is rarely enough to dominate at the highest level. Pressure alone is rarely enough. And grapplers like Charles Oliveira represent this new layer of complexity inside the sport. They don't just survive striking exchanges. They manipulate the fight. They create situations where opponents are forced into their world. Once that happens, chaos disappears, and control takes over. To some fans, that control can feel slower, less dramatic, less explosive. But technically, it represents the highest level of mixed martial arts. So did the BMF title really lose its meaning? Maybe the answer isn't that simple. Because fighters like Max Holloway still represent the spirit that the belt was originally built around. Relentless offense, unbreakable pace, the willingness to fight anyone, anywhere. At the same time, fighters like Charles Oliveira represent the modern evolution of MMA, a sport where chaos and calculation now exist side by side, where violence and technique are equally important. The BMF title was created to celebrate fighters who bring excitement to the cage. But as the sport continues to evolve, the definition of excitement might be changing as well. Maybe the BMF title didn't lose its meaning. Maybe the sport itself is forcing fans to rethink what that meaning truly is.